We have an honored speaker here very shortly. I think you all know him as our Executive Director for National. I did a little bit of looking up on the web, and it just goes on from page after page. It says something about this fellow, McPherson. I'll just cut it down to a couple, three things, so I'll give him the major time. Military families speak out. He's a member, very active there. Coordinating committee member to bring them home now. In the campaign against U.S. occupation in Iraq. He's a member of the steering committee of United for Peace and Justice. He's traveled to Iraq as a peace delegation with Veterans for Peace, and I believe probably some others. He has a son who served in Iraq, and he's now separated from the military, having survived the experience. McPherson.
I really appreciate you asking me to come speak. I'm honored. I was here last year, so I'm really honored to be able to come back again, which I guess it means I did make a fool of myself last time, so hopefully I won't this time too. And also, I won't speak as long. So I thought what I would do real quickly is go through some of the numbers for Veterans for Peace. This is from my January Executive Director's Report, which I gave to our board in January. At that time, and the numbers are somewhat different now because I think we have about 260 new members for the year. But in January, we had about 7,300 members. 4,692 of them were veterans with documentation, which means that they've sent us either a DD-214 or some other documents to show that they're vets. 910 without documentation, which is about 19.36% of veteran membership. So over 80% of our veteran members at that time were documented, which is very good, because you know how some people try to go after us about whether or not we're really vets and all that kind of thing. So our total veteran membership out of that 7,300 was 5,725. Our associate member being 1,118, which accounted for 25.20% of our membership. And we wanted to try to keep, I think the board's looking at around 25%, maybe a third at associate, but we haven't really gotten to a full discussion about that. But we certainly don't want it to be, in my opinion, any more than a third, because we want to continue to be a veterans organization. And the number of new members in 2007 was 1,082. Last year, our total fiscal revenues was fiscal year revenues was $406,299, and the budget I wrote for this year was $412,000. We have 127 assigned chapters. How many of them are really active? You know, like really out there? We have no idea, to be honest with you. But we did do a survey last year where we got 60 of the surveys back, so we know at least there's 60 chapters out there that are active and fill the surveys out. So, unfortunately, though, our renewal rate is not what it should be. Out of those numbers, we do have about 2,300 people who have not renewed going back to 2006. So we really need to work on that. That affects our budget a lot, and which then affects how effective we can be as an organization. Okay, so making VFP stronger. As I said, membership renewals are down, and I wanted to talk about why that might be. When Veterans for Peace was a small organization, we had hardcore members before I was in it. We were around 700 to 1,000 members. Those people were going to renew. I mean, those were the committed people. But since 9/11, obviously, we've grown sevenfold, tenfold. And if you make concentric circles, if you make circles around the hardcore membership, you can make a circle. The first circle is not as committed, possibly, as the hardcore members. And then you keep going out and you're less and less committed. Maybe not to ending the war, but to Veterans for Peace, is what I'm saying. Right now, we don't know where the hardcore membership is and that next circle in terms of commitment to VFP. So one of our challenges as you all being some of the hardcore members, so you wouldn't even be here this weekend, is to reach out to a lot of the other members to help them have more of a relationship that they feel with Veterans for Peace. That's one of our challenges to keep our organization strong, especially as we in the war, because we will in the occupation, And many people ask, well, what then? Will people still be motivated to stay in Veterans for Peace? Well, part of that is the relationships we build with our members so that they will feel like they're part of the organization as a part of their life. Of course, as I said before, the less membership we have, it affects our effectiveness, our credibility, our ability to do things from a national level and a local level. And you know, we talk a lot about, for example, media. Well, we can't really hire like a media professional if we don't have money to do that. So we have to really work on our membership. And we can, I'm sure in the chapter building workshop there was brainstorming about how to do that, so I'm not going to go into those types of things. Excuse me as I try to find where I am. Yeah, probably. I can look at you and look at this. I bet. Oh, okay. Thanks. Okay, raising national visibility. And when I say that, I don't mean the national office. I mean Veterans for Peace as a national organization. Expanding VFP membership and prestige. Because when I say prestige, I mean credibility and people looking to us as experts in what we're trying to do. Creating a VFP vision and developing sustainable national initiatives, I believe, is key to this. This means building peace, not just being against war, because we're Veterans for Peace. Right now, we're more of an opposition than we are in creating peace. Obviously, that's because we have a war that we need to oppose and we can get caught up in that. But in the long term, and I say war, occupation, in the long term, that's going to end, and if we don't have these sustainable vision and sustainable national initiatives and then sustainable local ones, then we're going to be flat when the occupation ends. So we really need to work on that. So some things that we're looking at, of course, we already have some things like the Korea Peace Campaign. We're looking at a no bases, the no bases movement that's taking place around the world. So we're looking at Veterans for Peace becoming a larger player in that. We're also looking at veteran services, and I've talked to some people about some of the ideas we have, but obviously helping veterans with post-traumatic stress, helping veterans with homelessness, taking a more active role in the sexual assault and rape. I had already started talking to the Women's Caucus, some people in the Women's Caucus about that before this weekend, so it was good to hear that people had that on their minds when I came here. But the thing is, the rubber meets the road locally, right? But we also have to act nationally because we have to raise our visibility as we become credible experts through our work on specific issues. So an example being, once we create whatever the program is going to be on sexual assault and rape, what should be happening in a few years is that when the news, the media wants to talk about that, they should call us because we have a strong program and we've created enough credibility in what we're doing so that they will call us. So that's the kind of thing, though, we have to do in different areas of concern. But the only way I believe you do that is if members not only continue to do their local work, we have to step up and do some national committee work. Because while, once again, the rubber meets the road locally, but if we're going to, we are a national organization, so we have to leverage our national presence. And the only way to do that is to have work that is seen from a national level. You know? So we have to do both. We have to do local work, we have to do national work, but we have to have members who are willing to do both. And I know it's not easy. So, I personally see that as being key to the long-term issue of what are we going to do with occupation is. You know, building structures of peace, being for peace, not just opposition, and people stepping up to build that national presence. I don't see the media and stuff as being the answer, because there's organizations out there are national organizations that raise a lot of money, but they really don't do anything. And that's not what we're about. We've never been about that. Our organization is about making things happen. So we just have to do it on a larger scale and with a different kind of vision and strategy. Ending the war. What do we do to do that in an occupation? Well, amplify Iraq veterans against the war's voice. I think that's certainly key. We've done that since, what was that? August of 2005, when Iraq Veterans Against the War was formed. 2004. That's right, in Boston. So we've done that, and we're going to continue to do that. One key to that right now is amplifying Winter Soldier. Having more and more people see Winter Soldier, pointing people to Iraq Veterans Against the War's website so they can see Winter Soldier. Support IVAW in their organizing of post-September 11 veterans, because that's their target. We have to organize pre-September 11 veterans. And if we help IVAW organize the post-September 11 veterans, some of them are going to join VFP. So we support IVAW in their organizing efforts, and we organize pre-September 11 veterans. And then the other thing we have to do is help the rest of the anti-war/peace movement organize the civilian population, because we add a lot of credibility to that organizing. And the stronger the civilian population is against the war, obviously that helps us and IVAW. So we have that task. We have to get beyond the choir and build peace, not just oppose a war. Getting beyond the choir is a big deal. And that's not what IVAW needs to do. We need to do that. So and I want us to understand that we have that mission to do that, get beyond the choir, that's different from what IVAW does. So we have a larger mission than IVAW does. And I think it's important for us to understand that. And on something I sent out a while ago, thanking everyone for the support for IVAW Winter Soldier. One of the last things I wrote, I'm just going to read it. However, our greatest test as Veterans for Peace is to develop a strategic long-term national vision to transform our country. We must create long-term initiatives that challenge our government's approach to the world, addresses people's needs, and builds structures of peace to end all wars. We must leverage our position as veterans to stir our fellow citizens. We must do all simultaneously. Support IVAW and embark on a more focused effort building VFP. We really have to be focused on our building of VFP. We have our own role to play to end this war and to end all wars. When I say our own role, I mean Veterans for Peace's role. We must be smart, innovative, and audacious in meeting this challenge. So that's my thoughts on what we need to do to build our organization. One of the things that the theme of this is sustainable activism, right? What I call the long struggle. One thing I think we need to do is recognize what we've done. We need to recognize the struggle is long and hard, and that we will not see the final outcome. We will see a few victories, some large and some small, along this long road. Now first, as far as what have we accomplished, and sometimes it seems like we've accomplished nothing, right? Because the occupation continues. But in my mind, let's look at just the past 4 years and the politics, because politics does reflect something. So 4 years ago, and I'm talking about presidential politics and Congress. 4 years ago, we had the Republicans wanting to continue down the same road, and we had Democrats saying we could do it better. Basically, that's what we had. We want to continue to fight the war as it is, that's the Republicans, and the Democrats saying we can do it better. Today, we have the Democrats, and I'm focusing on them because one of them is going to get in office, okay? And the Congress is going to be controlled by the Republicans or Democrats. That's not to diminish the other political parties, but that's just the reality, so I'm focusing on it. Today, we have Democrats at least saying they're going to bring the troops home, or some configuration of bringing the troops home. And we have Republicans taking a ridiculous position of staying in Iraq for 100 years. That's stupid, that's ridiculous. So we've affected change because we've totally changed the political conversation. We've moved the Democrats to a better position, one that we can hold them more accountable for, and we forced Republicans to say something that's so outlandish that most people are looking at them like they're crazy. That's good. I mean, we've made a change, and even though it's not what we want, you know, and it's not as far as we want to go, we have to understand that we made that happen. Another thing we need to understand, I think, is that our mission tackles a timely scourge of which this war is one episode in thousands of years of history. We almost have to ask, who do we think we are if we're going to change this, you know? I mean, we're trying to do something that's incredible. We're trying to end war. So I guess I say that because the challenge is so great that we need to understand how large it is, and that the changes that we make, they're not small because the challenge is so large. And though it will take time to end this occupation, in the larger scheme of things, the time is not that long, because war has been going on for a long, long, long time. So I heard someone earlier mention the civil rights movement when you were talking about sustainable activism, I believe. And it's interesting because I was going to talk about that, so I am going to talk about that. But I'll call it the civil rights movement, not the civil rights movement. Real quickly, usually when people think about the civil rights movement being African American or black people, they usually think of it as starting either in 1954 with Brown versus the Board of Education in Topeka, Kansas, or in 1955 when Rosa Parks refused to give up her seat in Montgomery, Alabama. What we could say it began years before with black veterans returning from World War II and saying, well, I'm not going to be treated like this. I just went over to Europe and fought for freedom, and here I come home and you're treating me like this. We could say that. We could even go further back and say that the movement began after the Civil War because there was a lot of resistance to the continued discrimination. And that resistance helped unite the resistance that we know of as the civil rights movement. So all these things even, you know, they actually have roots in things that go much further back than we think about. And you can even look at a longer term view that began in 1783 when Massachusetts outlawed slavery within its borders. So it was the first state to do that. So if you look at it in those terms, that's a really long time, and we're still in that process. But we'll start with 1954 with Brown Forces, the Board of Education in Topeka, Kansas, which then, 1955, Rosa Parks. But then another big thing happened in 1960 with the Greensboro sit-ins. So there's things that happened in between, but that was another big event, because sit-ins began to pop up all over the country. So you're looking at a 5-year time span between 1955, Rosa Parks, and these sit-ins. Now I say movements because a lot of movements came out of that atmosphere and that environment that the civil rights movement created. One of those things that came out of that was the free speech movement, which I believe started around 1963 with students at Berkeley. And one of the speeches that was given, which some of you probably know, and I didn't write down here to quote, but it was something about putting your bodies on the gears of the machine. And some of you might know that speech. That was part of that. A lot of that came from speeches that Martin Luther King had given. So we know that there was inspiration. Another movement that popped up at that period of time is the second wave of the women's movement, which once again we could actually go back further and look at as far as long struggles. The first wave, which began in 1848 with Elizabeth Cady Stanton and her friend and mentor Lucretia Mott, with the Declaration of Sentiments. And I want to say something about that because in the Declaration of Sentiments they had and they were talking about the different things that women were being denied. And interestingly, Lucretia and Elizabeth Cady had actually attended a abolitionist convention, and I believe it was in London, but I'm not sure. Somebody might know. And before this particular convention that they were doing about women's rights, and their voices weren't being heard, and they felt like, wow, we're being disrespected as women here, and here we are trying to fight for abolition of slavery, but we're not being respected as women, which gave them impetus or motivated them to fight for their rights as women. And at this convention where they had these Declaration of Sentiments, Frederick Douglass also participated. But at that particular convention, one of the things that did not pass was women asking for the right to vote, which I think is kind of interesting that at that period of time, most of the women didn't see where they could get that right. This was in 1848, and women did not receive the right to vote until 1920. So there's a 70-year struggle to get the right to vote. And to us today, it's like, what? The right to vote? 70 years? So once again, long-term struggle. Another struggle that's part of the civil rights movement is the struggle for gay, lesbian, bisexual, transgender, and queer people, which was launched, once again, when people say it was launched, it was really launched before that, because there were other struggles that took place before 1969, the Stonewall in New York, where a number of GLBTQ people stood up to the police who had been harassing them over and over, and they decided, I'm tired of this, I'm not going to take it anymore. And we're still visibly in that civil rights struggle as people, one example of it is people demanding the right to marry. So, and all these things still continue today, all these struggles. So we have to understand, I think, that what we're trying to do is long-term, and in some ways, when we talk about ending war, it's larger than any one of these, because all these play a role in why we have a war, you know? So I'm saying this to say that we, even though it's tiring and we get tired and we feel like we're not making a change, we are making a change. You just have to keep pushing and pushing and have faith based on history, because history has shown that through activism, through perseverance, through speaking truth to power, through building solidarity, through all the things that we're doing, change takes place. I mean, I just talked about some movements that in the larger scheme of things are short, because we're talking about war going on for thousands of years, aren't we? So after this war ends, and I think I talked about some of the things that BFP needs to do, but the peace movement in general, I believe, we must solidify and I think we're starting to do this. We must solidify the peace side and the justice side of the peace and justice slogan, and it must become more than a slogan. If we're able to do that, and I think once again that we're starting to do that, we're starting to solidify that, this will sustain and grow the peace movement as a vision of peace and justice is developed for more and more people to take action to create. Because a lot of people right now, when you say peace and justice, they have no idea what you're talking about, what does that mean, and a lot of us are not even sure what it means. And then a lot of people who are fighting for justice in this country are not involved in the traditional idea of what the peace movement is, right? And then many times people who are in the traditional idea of the peace movement are not fully engaged in the struggles of many people in this country. These two things have got to come together. And as they do, and we struggle with each other and trying to figure out how to help them come together, I believe a vision of what peace and justice means will begin to be seen by us. And then people will be able to start building those structures to make that vision happen. Before I joined Veterans for Peace, I created this website, which I have not been attending to at all, called C-Peace. And the purpose of it is C, the letter C, and the word peace. And it means two things. One is conversation peace, which means talking about what peace means, and the other thing is seeing peace. And we have to do those two things. We have to talk about what peace is, and we have to envision it. And that's how we bring things into being, is by seeing it, talking about it, and then it won't just happen, but you'll be able to create it. And so I think that's what we have to do. I'm sorry I'm not more specific, but that's for all of us to figure out together. I have no idea about myself what those things are. That's where the struggling comes in. We were talking about in the workshop, how do you get along or whatever. Well, we have to struggle and have those conflicts to figure out what the specifics are and to build that vision. So, as I said, that's going to be short. And that's it. Any questions? I'm on time. Yes, sir.
Yeah, Michael, I just wanted to ask, one of the roadblocks to any 501c3 is the laws that govern 501c3 organizations.
Right.
And I'm starting to see more and more 501c3s partner with 501c4 organizations. And I'm just wondering if it's time, thinking ahead to the future of the message you just gave us about refocusing on how do we continue the message of peace beyond war and go do that. One of the handicaps we have is not being able to be a loud voice because of the restriction of being a 501c3 in terms of lobbying. We need to be able to conduct some of the political stuff without fear of losing our 501c3 status, especially for smaller groups. And I'm just wondering if you might address that in context of what you just, talked about.
Sure.
The future message of the peace work that we have to continue beyond when the war ends.
Right. Well, we're certainly looking at the 501c4 because if we're going to be going back to some of the sustained initiatives, working for justice for veterans and victims of war. And let's say the veterans specifically, when we're looking at the services that are not being provided, post-traumatic stress, things of that nature. Or when we're looking at the sexual harassment and sexual assault, things of that as well. There's two pieces to it, I think. One is advocacy, which gets into lobbying Congress to hold the military and the president accountable. The other side is direct services, which I really don't see Veterans for Peace as an organization participating in, but I do think that we can facilitate our members getting training to be peer counselors and things like that, so we can provide some people to be able to do that work in a coordinated way. So in order to do that, we're going to have to, first of all, we have to be more, I in a national office, has to document better how much resources we use on lobbying, because there's a cap on what you can as a 501c3, but you can lobby, but there's a cap. The other thing is, as we expand that, we have to have a 501c4. So, you know, we've been talking about that at the board level. And I can't say exactly when that's going to happen, but I foresee if we're going to do some of the things we're thinking about doing, we're going to have that. Yeah. And another thing is Paul Cox, who's in San Francisco, and he does the Agent Orange Responsibility and Relief Campaign. They're actually looking at a huge campaign effort of lobbying, where he was talking about trying to raise $250,000 to do this. And unless they go off and start their own 501c3 for the campaign, if they raise $250,000 and stay under Veterans for Peace, we're going to need that C4 because that's a significant amount of money to use on lobbying. Yes, sir.
Yeah, Michael, that's good talk. Although we do have a lot of racism and poverty concerns and prejudices of the lower class that have a lot to do with war. I think that the main thing that we are fighting here is what the reason why wars exist. And we will always deal with this in a large extent in the future as well, in terms of what really we need to do. And that is that the reason why this war is happening because the majority of members of Congress voted in favor of the president. And it is a foundation of Congress that needs to change. I mean, the money in politics, campaign finance reform, above all, I think needs to occur in order to get people in Congress who actually are representative of the people and not representative of multilateral corporations or multinational corporations that fuel this perpetual war. Not just Iraq, but it's the war after this war. So until we get at the foundation, and I agree with this gentleman that was saying that maybe C4 has become more political in our movement because peace does not make money. It's war that makes money.
Well, you know, there are I don't know if it's philosophical, but different ideas about why there's war. Some people say it's capitalism. Some people say what you just said. This is what I know. I know that wars have been going on before there was capitalism. I know there was wars before there was the U.S., you know, before there was Congress, before corporations had the power they have for the wars. So I also know that in order for me to go out and kill somebody, I need to see them a certain way. I need to perceive them a certain way. That's why, as military people, we're taught that the enemy is a particular thing. They're dehumanized, they're goose, they're ragheads, they're sandmakers, they're this or they're that. I know that for African Americans, in order for us to be enslaved, because when blacks and whites, and they weren't even calling each other, we weren't calling ourselves blacks, and white people weren't calling themselves white. I mean, everybody had their own ethnicities from Europe, and then through different ways of having people think, white people became white, black people became black, and we became the others of each other. So that allowed for the dehumanization of me, and then black people were looking at white people in not necessarily a human way either. I believe that this is why we have wars, because if I'm looking at you as the other, it is real easy to manipulate me to kill you. Now, the motivation for why I'm being manipulated might be a whole bunch of things. It could be because of oil, it could be because of that, like, you know, whatever at any particular point in history. But the basic thing is, I see you as the other. And if I didn't see you as the other, if I saw you as my family member, or if I cared about you or something, we're going to figure out another way to solve this problem, because I can't take your life because, you know, you're not the other. So I'm not diminishing what you're saying because it certainly plays a huge role. I don't think that's the core of why we have war. And it certainly isn't the core of why we can't build solidarity so that people who are disenfranchised, the people who are not gaining from the system, aren't able to work together so that we can do exactly what you're talking about. We have to build solidarity across ethnic, racial, gender lines so that we can stand up to these powers and say, you can't do that. You can't do that to us anymore. We're not going to take it no more. It's too many of us. We care about each other, and we're not going to do it. We have to build that solidarity. And then I think it will be easier to deal with what you're talking about. But that's just my opinion.
Well, I just see it the other way around. And I know we can get into discussion all night.
Right.
But it's much more difficult to have a discussion with anybody, including in this room, regarding racism. It's easier to have a discussion about the powers that be that are the main reason why we have the wars. I understand how we can manipulate people to fight your wars regarding racism, but in regards to the root cause, which is power and money, the ability to make money, is what has to be fought and more intensely, I think.
I agree. But I'm just telling you that you're not going to get the kind of allies that I think you need if you're not going to address things that are affecting those people's lives. So right now, I'm the only black person in here, and there's a reason for that. Okay? Well, one of the reasons is because black people are facing some things that they're saying if there's a war or not, I'm still going to be facing. You know, when the war started in 2003, when we did the dire distress in Washington, D.C., I talked to some of the homeless guys there, and they're like, I don't care who's in office, Republican or Democrat, I'm still going to be homeless. That's real. You know? So, once again, until we build a solidarity movement, and really, things change when you break up those fissures between people. That's when things change, because then the power structure is not sure what to do until they figure out another way to divide us. As soon as they figure that out, then they can rebuild their power structure. But when that stuff gets broken down, they're like, oh shit, what am I going to do? You know, and then they figure something else out. I believe that's one of the reasons Martin Luther King was killed, because he was moving to a whole other level. He was doing the Poor People's Campaign, which was going to bring poor black people and poor white people together, and that was going to change the whole dynamics of capitalism. And not only did you have conservatives that didn't want to see that happen, but you had liberals who saw the United States as being egalitarian, and if you change that dynamic, that blew up their whole, that just blew up their whole idea of what American was, because the reason that you gain money is because, you know, you're good, you're the best, that's why you rise up to the top, and the people who aren't don't, you know, that's the whole game, right? But he was getting ready to break that all up, so, hey, we gotta get rid of this guy. That's what I think. You know? Any other? Yes.
Well, Michael, I talked with you before about this idea of strategic long-term vision, and we keep saying we need to do that.
Yeah.
And how do we get started doing that? You know,
And right for the board, make it happen. I'm serious.
Do you think this is going to come out of the board, or is this how do we take the physical steps to create this vision? Is this something that we need to do at the convention? Is this something that
I don't have a total answer. I don't know. I do know it's going to take leadership from some individual people to make it happen. And it could happen in several ways. It could happen at the convention. There's been discussion about changing the way the convention is done. You know, so that there can be some kind of strategic planning. You know, and I thought, well, you do that, and then maybe every other convention, you know, you evaluate throughout the year, you know, but then you look at changing, because you need some time to let the thing get going and see if it's going to work, right? So you don't want to change it just a year later, or maybe a year after that you change it. You know, so we have to figure out, but it's going to take people stepping up and taking the lead. And so it could happen to the board, you know, or it could happen at the convention. You know, or it could happen, like I said, we do these initiatives, we have to have some people step up to actually make the initiative happen. So I don't know.
This other idea that you mentioned about national committees, I think this is really a good idea with a lot of promise, and I'd like to think maybe this is a good idea, you know, something we could brainstorm about. Well, we have a good group of people here, but what do you think that would look like? That we would have people from all chapters, all different chapters, and you know, if you want to take one issue like a sexual assault, let's say in the military,
Yeah.
that's one issue. So people would just say, "Boy, that's an issue I'm interested in, and I want to be on the national committee to raise awareness about that."
Right. Okay, so this is what I think is necessary to find a ASB. Yes, we have people who want to work on that issue. We have a staff member, well, we have to raise money, so we got to write some grants or get somebody who's interested to help fund it, or a number of people. We have a staff member who helps facilitate what the committee wants to do. The staff member is not the head of the committee, and it's not the person who makes those things happen, but they facilitate, you know, what things have to come out of the office or whatever. The committee chair or spokespeople are the ones that speak on the issue and become experts on the issue. And the committee develops what the initiative is. You know, if there's going to be a lobbying campaign, if it's going to be this or that, you know, is there going to be an education campaign or whatever. You know, so in the national office, you have the webmaster who makes sure the website, you know, all those things. And the committee is keeping a pulse on that issue throughout the country, so that if there's something happens, the committee can react to it. That's my